Good morning, William to Yaxley, and welcome to another assembly. It's great to be with you again in another week, and I hope you're having a really good week. Well, we started off last week talking about kindness, and we said that this will be our value for this half term. I can't believe how far we are through this half term already. So last week we thought about kindness, and we thought about a story, didn't we, from the Bible? And we thought about the story of the Good Samaritan. And we thought about who was kind in that story. Because this poor man had been attacked by people and left at the side of the road, and all the people that we thought might stop didn't stop and help. They just walked straight by that man. And then it was the person that really surprised us, because the person that these two groups didn't really get on. But this was the person that stopped at the side of the road, helped this injured man and took him to safety. And so we can find kindness in really surprising places. I wonder where you can find kindness, or where do you give kindness? And for all of us that will be different, because we have different setups at home. We have different groups of friends with different groups that we're part of. And so as part of that, we might be able to share kindness with somebody, or we might be able to receive kindness when people are kind to us. And it might, as I say, be different for you, but I thought I'd show you a few pictures of people that I think of when I think about kindness. That's my family. We were at Chiquitos at the time, having a meal out, and that's my family. And I think about kindness when I think about them. I think about kindness and care, two things that often go together. Oh, I can't see that very well, can you? That's my husband, and we've been married for 22 years now. And so we've gone through quite a lot of different things together. And he shows me a huge amount of kindness at times when things are difficult, or when I'm really busy at work. He's the person who cooks my meal, puts it on the table in front of me, and makes sure I eat before I go out to another meeting. But for you, it might be that it's your friend. This is one of my lovely friends here. It might be one of your friends who's a person that is kind to you. But I read something on Facebook the other day, and it said, do you know, we don't know what people are going through in their lives. And so what we need to do is walk through our life being kind to other people. And it's not particularly difficult to be kind to people. I just often think about it as being how we would like to be treated ourselves. Many of you will know that before I became a vicar, I was a nurse. And so I'd be working with people on a hospital ward, sometimes in a clinic. And often these people were worried about things, they had things in their mind, and I could show kindness as part of my job. I could listen to people and take some time. And so kindness is such an important value to be at the root of everything that we do in our school. And we talked about our values, didn't we? We talked about doing things with all of our hearts. When we do things with all of our hearts, those things come naturally because we are showing God in our lives. So I want to tell you today a story about a lady called Ruth. Again, if you've been in school for a few years, you will probably have heard this before. But Ruth was someone who showed amazing kindness to her mother-in-law, so to her husband's mum. Family relationships can get quite complicated. And I'm trying to work it out myself, her mother-in-law, there you go, Naomi, was someone who lived in Bethlehem. Now we know something else about Bethlehem, don't we? That's the place where Jesus was born. So a very special place. But this story about Ruth is written a lot of years before Jesus was born. And so we have Ruth and Naomi. Naomi is the mother-in-law and Ruth is the daughter-in-law. And Naomi had moved from Bethlehem to a place called Moab because there's a lack of food in her country. We call it a famine. And we can see the news today and know that that is still the case in lots of countries around the world, that there is a famine. So people don't have enough to eat. So they moved to a new country in the hope that they would find enough to eat, as we see lots and lots of refugees crossing the seas, going across borders to try and find safety and food and shelter, those basic things that we need as people. And so Naomi and her husband had moved to Moab. They'd had children in that time, and their children had married. And so one of their sons had married this lady called Ruth. The other son had married a lady called Orpah. Now, very sadly for Naomi, a lot of her family died. Her husband died and her sons died. Now, in those days, remember, we are talking well over 2,000 years ago. If a woman wasn't married, then it became very difficult for them to find a living, to be able to make money, to be able to feed themselves. And so at this time, Naomi decided that she was going to go back to Bethlehem, to her hometown where she had some family. And she said to her two daughter-in-laws, to Orpah and to Ruth, I'm going to go back to Bethlehem, but you stay here. You don't need to come back with me. And so they had an initial time where they all said their goodbyes, and Naomi was about to set on her way. But Ruth said to her, Naomi, actually, I want to come with you back to Moab. And Naomi said, no, you should stay here because this is where your family are. This is where your God is. This is where there is food, lots of things going on. So you should stay here. But Naomi so much thought that Ruth should stay there. But Ruth also thought that she should go with her mother-in-law and take care of her. And so Ruth and Naomi eventually travel back to Bethlehem. And a lot of years have passed since Naomi had last been in Bethlehem. And people got a little bit gossipy when she came in. They're like, oh my goodness, there's that lady who moved to Moab. But they eventually saw her and they started talking to her, and she eventually started to settle into her hometown. Now for Ruth, this wasn't a place she'd ever been before, so she had a lot of things to get used to. One of the first things she did was to go and look for food and to look for work. Now we're coming up to our school harvest festival. And you want to think about a field, maybe you want to think about our beautiful sunflower fields that we've had around Yaxley down towards home. Maybe think about the fields at the bottom of the fens. And the fields in biblical times, in Bible times, they used to leave a margin. So you'd have your field, and then within that field you'd kind of farm the middle area, but you would leave an area around the outside. And that was so that those without food could go and gather crops and have food to eat. So today we have food bank and we share our food through food bank. We didn't have things like food bank then, so the farmer would do his harvest and he'd do the main bit of his field, but there'd be an outskirts to the field that would be left for those people that needed to gather food for themselves. So Ruth was able to go down and gather some food. And they found out she was really good at doing this. She was very hard-working. And so the person in charge of the farm said, well, let's give her some work. Let's keep those margins and she can get lots from those margins. And then she'll be able to feed her family. Now, as it happened, because God is always in these stories in the Bible, it happened that the person who owned that farm was a man called Boaz. And Boaz was actually a relative of Naomi and of Ruth. And Ruth started talking to him and they worked out they knew each other. And in those days, if you were a male and you were a family member of somebody who had been widowed, as Naomi had been, then you had a responsibility to take that person in and care for them. However, Boaz knew that there was another family member who also should have first been the one that should have taken them in and cared for them. And so he asked his family member, well, would you be able to take on Naomi and Ruth and care for them? It's not how our system works today, I know, but again, we're thinking way over 2,000 years ago. And this man said no, he couldn't do this. And so Boaz took on that responsibility, someone else who in this story showed kindness. And eventually Ruth and Boaz married, which meant that that family had safety. Naomi was able to be fed by going for the harvest that Ruth harvested, and they were taken care of by Boaz, who married Ruth. And it is one of those stories where it was happily ever after. But it wasn't happy in the beginning, it was quite hard. And Ruth had a really tough decision to make about whether she was going to travel with Naomi and leave her own home and her own family, But she felt that responsibility to care for Naomi, to travel with her, and to make sure that she was taken care of. And God was in this story looking over all of them. And Boaz was the person that was able to provide for them and provide family and care for them as well. Now last week we looked at these. I was showing you them as two figures that show love and care to each other, and a little card that talks about celebrating a treasured friendship of sharing and understanding. Well, these people remind me of Naomi and of Ruth, because Ruth makes sure that Naomi is taken care of. She loves her and she cares for her and she travels with her until they can be taken care of in the new land of Bethlehem. Now hopefully today you won't be asked to do anything quite as big as leave Yaxley or leave a place to care for somebody, but some of you are caring for people. Some of you are caring for members of family that are poorly. Some of you just have wonderful, lovely, caring hearts, and you care for those around you. Perhaps you look out in class for someone who's struggling, or again in the playground, as we often talk about, looking out for that person who's on their own. And we can show kindness in all kinds of different places. Doesn't just have to be shown in school. We can show it at home. We can show it as we walk about the place. And I talked to you last week, didn't you, about those amazing people from the school who were so kind to that lady who had fallen in the road. And so I wonder where we can find opportunities for kindness this week. So let's take a moment to think about that story, to think maybe what was surprising in that story. Who in that story do we most want to be like? About Naomi, who made that bold decision to come back home? About Ruth, who made that very brave decision to come with Naomi? Or Boaz, who took that decision to care for his family? So let's take a moment to think. I wonder what you thought about. This is one of my very favourite stories in the Bible. As I said, it's in the Old Testament, and it only takes up 4 chapters. It's a really small book in the Bible, and the book in the Bible is called Ruth, and it helps to think about the kindness and the goodness and the care of Ruth for her mother-in-law Naomi, and how Boaz also cared for them. And so let's pray together, and we can remember our special Amen. Loving God, we thank you for this story. We thank you for the example of Ruth and how she made a really bold and brave decision to travel with Naomi to make sure that she was safe, to go and collect food, and how your hand, God, was in all of this. Your care was there for these people as they meet with Boaz, who marries Ruth, and they are taken care of as a family. We remember, loving God, that this story was set a very long time ago and things are very different in our world today. But we can still remember the special values that are shown in this story of care and of kindness. And help us today and in this coming week to find opportunities for kindness to somebody who needs that today. Maybe in a smile. Maybe just by helping somebody by picking something up from the floor that has dropped. Maybe by looking out for somebody who is lonely. So help us today to be people who are kind. Amen. Well, I hope that you have a really good week. I hope that you have a lovely weekend. And I hope that you find people who are kind to you as well as showing kindness to others. Take care and God bless you, Yaxley. Bye.